Hello and welcome to this special bulletin. The agonizing wait revolving around the GST issue finally seems to be making some positive development. Yes, I am referring to the latest key recommendation made by the Chief Economic Advisor panel on the much awaited and speculated GST rates. The panel has recommended a range of rates which is to be spread over a proposed three-tier structure of rates likely to be adopted in the Indian GST model. Now let's straight away go to the press briefing where the Chief Economic Advisor Mr. Arvind Subramaniam is making these recommendations.
It will facilitate Make in India by making One India. The Indian GST is going to be the cleanest dual VAT that combines in some ways the best of unitary centralized systems and the best of decentralized systems. The revenue neutral rate is that single rate that preserves overall revenues. So when we speak about a revenue neutral rate, it's like saying if we had just one rate for the GST, what would that rate be? That would preserve revenue, the current whatever revenues need to be preserved. That is the revenue neutral rate. If we had the luxury if the political process decided to have one rate, it would be 15% for the GST.
The revenue neutral rate will further translate into a possibly three-rate structure, that is a high rate, which is actually a demerit rate for luxury items like alcohol, tobacco, etc. Then there is a standard rate which will govern the taxation of majority of the items, and finally a lower rate which will govern the essential items.
Once you have a revenue neutral rate, then the country, the GST Council will have to make a series of policy choices which will translate this one rate into a structure of rates. And that structure of rates, could be 2 or 3 rates. And if you have, say, 3 rates, there would be a lower rate, there would be a much higher rate, and there would be a standard rate. The low rate and the high rate are, what we said should be 12 and 40. The standard rate will vary between approximately 17 and 18%.
The panel also recommends abolition of all interstate tax, including the additional 1% tax. In fact, this is a very well-timed move because this addresses one of the 3 strong demands of the Congress party.
Given that, Make in India is so important and that you need to make in India by making One India, the committee recommends eliminating all the taxes on interstate trade, including the 1% additional tax.
The debatable issue of the rate of revenue sharing between the state and the center has also been addressed in these recommendations.
How this will be allocated between the center and the states will again, of course, be decided by the GST Council, but it's clear that this allocation will and must reflect the revenues to be raised at the center and the states. So the allocation of this 17% or between 17 and 18% will depend upon how much revenues will preserve revenue neutrality for the center and how much revenue will preserve revenue neutrality for the states. So for example, one possible thing could be if it's 17, it could be 8 at the center and 9 at the state.
Mr. Subramaniam clearly emphasizes on the need of phasing out exemptions for the success of the GST model. Let's see what he has to say about this.
I think it's fair to say that we are an exemptions Raj, that exemptions have proliferated, especially at the center. And this is really a historic opportunity to rationalize exemptions. Addressing exemptions are key to having the kind of low rates that will help taxpayer compliance going forward. I really do think it would be preferable to avoid constitutionalizing the specifics of tax policy, whether it's in terms of what rate there should be or what kind of exclusions there should be, constitutional exclusions there should be.
As expected, the controversial demand of the Congress party to put the GST rates as a part of the constitutional bill is not featuring in these recommendations. So that was Mr. Subramanian briefing the press. Although the detailed recommendation report is to be published this coming Monday, yet several key issues have been touched upon in this press meeting. The most important issue is the revenue neutral rate, which is expected to be between 15 to 15.5%. Although in my view, it is the standard rate, which is a more realistic rate, is going to govern the majority of the items. Yes, these rates are recommendatory in nature because they have to be adopted by the GST Council and then has to be approved by the Parliament. Yet, this is a positive development. Let's hope the current political standoff hovering over the GST bill gets dissolved and we finally give some importance to the financial reform of this nation. Now let's go to our weekly episode of This Week That Was.
Welcome to the week that was, TIOL's weekly news roundup.
Today we bring you wide-ranging stories.
There are policy-related stories,
Relaxed norms for external commercial borrowings.
new taxes and a human interest story too.
But first, let's consider the question of accountability when justice is delayed.
The arms of law may be long, but they are rather tardy. Take this case. A Delhi court acting under the Prevention of Corruption Act sentenced an 88-year-old former joint secretary to 1 year rigorous imprisonment and fine of rupees 10 lakh for amassing disproportional assets of rupees 23 lakh. The sentence came 30 years after the suspension of this officer from the Indian legal services. Mr. Krishan Bahadur, a resident of Delhi, was appointed as a deputy legal advisor in the Ministry of Law and Justice in 1969. In December 1984, or 15 years of service later, and around his retirement, Bahadur was suspended while he was Joint Secretary and Legal Advisor in the Ministry of Commerce. The Central Bureau of Investigation, acting on a complaint of misappropriation of funds, found in his possession assets disproportionate to his known income. Mr. Krishan Bahadur claimed that the entire prosecution evidence was false. Many questions arise. Is anyone being held accountable for the delay, or is it systematic? Can an old man go through the rigors of rigorous imprisonment? What do you think? Let's now go to Sudipto for news on speedy disposal of sick companies.
The government is drafting a policy document for speedy sale or revival of loss-making public sector companies without the bureaucratic hitches. At the pivot of this policy framework will be the formation of a divestment commission that shall take the decision for revival, stake, sellout or complete divestment of listed companies or asset sale for unlisted loss-making units. The Divestment Commission will be headed by the Cabinet Secretary, while its members shall include the Secretaries of the Department of Disinvestment, Public Enterprises and Economic Affairs. Even the Secretaries of the Ministries presiding over the loss-making PSU shall have a say in the final decision-making. Some of the 65 loss-making public sector units include Air India, HMT, MTNL and Fertilizer Corporation of India. Indian businesses needing an influx of funds may now borrow from overseas lenders in rupee denomination without incurring currency risks. The RBI has liberalized its policy on external commercial borrowings, that is ECB, with effect from April 1st, 2016. Earlier, in April this year, the RBI had allowed eligible Indian companies to issue rupee-denominated bonds abroad, which have been a great hit with the Japanese investors. By now allowing companies to make ECB borrowings in INR, where the foreign lenders bears the exchange rate risk exposure and not the Indian borrowers, will help update the rupee status into a more international currency. The RBI has also raised the limit for small value ECBs with minimum average maturity of 3 years from $20 million to $50 million. Now on to Asha for new guidelines about storage and handling of smuggled gold.
Can stolen goods be stolen again? Yes. The Central Board of Excise and Customs has been concerned about the increase in the loss and theft of smuggled gold and other high-value goods from the strong rooms and seized goods godowns. Recently, more than 16 kilograms of gold was stolen from the customs office besides other such thefts. Although there are guidelines already existing for handling and storage of seized, detained and confiscated goods, the CBEC has now issued fresh instructions establishing a custodian of the goods besides clear directions on the preparation of inventory, packaging and sealing of goods, safe storage, quarterly inspection of goods by a committee, the hierarchy of officers issuing the order for the movement of valuables, and even guidelines for the maintenance of records. These instructions state that only officers with established integrity may be posted as the custodian of the strong room or godown. Officers in the supervisory position will also be subjected to vigilance and integrity checks. Detailed instructions are provided on preparation of inventory of the seized goods and its packaging in non-deteriorating containers to be sealed with wire or metal seals and not rope or wax seals. Quarterly inspection of these goods must be carried out by a committee. Finally, these guidelines make the custodian responsible for the physical custody of the packages with seals intact. Does it require theft of gold worth several crores for the board to realize that it needs a double locking system for the warehouse? Now for some news on the restructuring of the Provident Fund organization.
India's retirement body, the Employees Provident Fund Organization, has brought in the necessary technology to update its delivery mechanisms. However, the EPFO now faces the major challenge of filling up 6,000 vacancies to actually enable its services to reach the public. The EPFO has a sanctioned staff strength of 24,000 to run 123 offices across the country, divided into 10 zones. On the client side, it has 5 crore subscribers and 50 lakh pensioners. The Central Board of Trustees, its apex decision-making body, is expected to meet next week to consider the proposed plan for organizational restructuring. This would include promotion of its officers and increase in the number of sanctioned posts across all cadres. The zonal officers are also expected to be bifurcated into 13 zones for better service delivery and better monitoring and review of field officer performance. Do private coaching institutes need regulation? Let's find out.
To prepare for competitive exams, students have flocked to private coaching centers which have proliferated in the unorganized sector and are doing brisk business to the tune of an astounding rupees 2.4 lakh crore or nearly $40 billion annually. But now this sector may be better regulated if the government enforces the recommendations of the Ashok Mishra Committee, which was appointed to recommend changes to the IIT Joint Entrance Examination, but extended its agenda after assessing the growing numbers of unscrupulous operators. In its report submitted to the Ministry of Human Resources, the Ashok Mishra panel has recommended setting up of a regulatory body to check the private coaching centers flourishing in Kota and Indian metro cities, which are adversely impacting the entire school education system. An all-India council regulating the coaching institutes shall ensure the best practices are maintained and fees are regulated. While coaching institutes may be required to report to the council, what about private tutors? Unless the education system is improved from within and turned around, such external regulation may provide only a temporary solution. Let's now find out what's on the cards for financial institutions under the automatic exchange of information.
There may be no financial secrets anymore. The 6th meeting of the Global Group on Automatic Exchange of Information has just concluded in New Delhi. Discussions were held by this global forum on the methodology for transparency and exchange of information to prevent tax evasion. The AEOI, or the Group on Automatic Exchange of Information, seeks to target financial institutions and certain financial intermediaries for obtaining information on clients who hold the accounts outside the jurisdiction of their country of residence. It covers banking institutions that accept deposits, financial institutions holding assets for third parties, investment companies, and insurance companies. The AUI regulation are based on the US FATCA, or the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, and designed to ensure compliance with the new provisions of the OECD's Common Global Standard for Exchanging Information Automatically, which is called as the Common Reporting Standard, or CRS. About 64 member countries have already agreed to the AUI principle and will exchange information automatically on the basis of bilateral or multilateral agreements. India too joined this group and has been elected as a vice chair. Discussions in Delhi focused on confidentiality and data safeguards to be completed by 2016, which is necessary considering the huge voluminous data exchange and the consequence of any breach of confidentiality. After all, the supplying country must have confidence that the data is safe with the receiving country. Issues relating to the process of monitoring and implementation of the CRS were also discussed. The first exchange between the authorities is scheduled for September 2017. Now for some international news about the Millionaires of Singapore.
While Hong Kong may pride itself on having more millionaires than Singapore, this vanity may be short-lived. Singapore has mostly received an influx of high net worth individuals, mostly Indians and Chinese, who may have relocated from Hong Kong to avoid the social unrest driven by a challenge to communist China. A report from Wealth Insight, a source of global net worth intelligence, indicates that the number of millionaires in Singapore is increasing. This surge in the growth of Singapore's millionaires at over 18% will soon outpace the 15% growth in Hong Kong, its rival city-state, by 2020. Currently, about 1 in 35 Singaporeans is a millionaire. Within 5 years, the report expects this ratio to be 1 in 30 of the population. However, in quantum of wealth, Singapore takes a beating. The average wealth of the high net worth individuals in Singapore is the lowest in Asia at about $5.2 million each. Indonesia is the highest, with the average wealth of its millionaires at $6.5 million each. Now coming up, another cess, this time on vehicles and tires.
As if the domestic cess on education, environment, and Swachh Bharat were not enough, we may now need to pay a global cess on vehicles too. At the second Global Summit on Road Safety held in Brasilia recently, the United Nations proposed a global tax to be imposed on new vehicles, imported used cars, and tires to generate funds for road safety. This is similar to the Ebola case imposed on airline travel to raise funds to battle the disease. Justifying the cess, the UN reasoned that internationally more than 1 million people get killed in road accidents annually, which is more than 3,000 deaths daily. About 90% of these accidents happen in the middle and low-income countries. Road accidents are the 9th major cause of death in general, and the leading cause for death among youths between 15 to 29 years. In India, about 150,000 people die in road accidents annually. It is expected that even a small surcharge levied on global sale of about 18 billion cars and 1 billion tires annually would raise a huge amount. The UN shall form a high-level panel to create the UN Fund, which nations are expected to agree to without too much fuss. The resolution proposing the creation of this UN Fund is expected to be passed by the UN General Assembly in 2016. Now the last news of this episode, a rag picker in Delhi receiving UN award.
Environment is international and e-waste needs to be disposed responsibly. Helping the country in this mission for more than 20 years is a 35-year-old rag picker from Delhi who has now been invited to Paris to receive the UN Climate Solutions Award for keeping the environment clean. Mr. Mohammad Khokhan Hamid started picking waste since he was 14. 3 years ago, the NGO Chintan educated rag pickers that burning e-waste was hazardous for people and the environment as it contained toxic chemicals and flame retardants. Mohammed, along with other waste pickers, junk dealers, and doorstep waste collectors, was enlisted in the NGO's project From Toxic to Green, under which e-waste was channelized safely. With special training, Mohammed today collects waste from around 100 houses in central Delhi. He has never been out of Delhi, but now he's headed to Paris. On this note, we conclude this bulletin of the week that was.
Please do share your news and views to editor@TIOL.in. Thank you for watching.
Have a wonderful weekend ahead.